Ah yes, the bridge, viaduct, aqueduct or even flyover. A formidable structure. I love bridges of all kinds, shapes and sizes, and there is just so much to love. Each bridge is unique to its area, who designed it, built it, and the reasons to why it's even there in the first place. They have been used by humans for thousands of years and are the embodiment of humans having a common problem and coming together to solve it. Still today, they are a marvel of engineering and architecture, and they offer a valuable insight into innovation over the years and historic perspectives. From the stepping stones and fallen trees to eventually Neolithic boardwalks across marshes, examples of such bridges include the Sweet Track and Post Track in England that are approximately 6,000 years old, all the way to the bridges of the 21st century, sometimes spanning miles at a time. We have a whole range of bridges from across the ages and they fascinate me. In this little series, we are going to be talking about some of them that I like, the history behind them and just why I think that they're awesome. I sincerely hope you enjoy hearing about this as much as I enjoy telling you. More specifically, here in our first video in this possible series, we are going to talk about the Thornton branch of Bradford, Halifax and Keighley Railway's viaduct located in Thornton, Bradford, aptly named the Thornton Viaduct. This one is close to my heart, around 4 miles to be specific, just on the outskirts of the city of Bradford, so I have had the pleasure of actually visiting this one in person. It was completed in 1878 with locally quarried Yorkshire stone and was a monolithic deal at the time, not only for its sheer size, but it was symbolic for the connection the whole rail line would offer the area. The viaduct was part of a project that provided a new rail route and station for an area that didn't have one before. The viaduct was more specifically part of Great Northern Railway's Queensbury lines running between Queensbury and Keighley, connecting countless villages and towns together along the 14-mile stretch. Still today, building a viaduct of its size and complexity would still pose significant challenges. They used 750,000 bricks and also incorporated 20 barrel vaulted arches, and we'll come back to those in just a moment, each with a span of 40 feet. It is 300 yards in length with a rare inverted S-shaped curve because of the rough terrain they were building on. They had to use the S-shape to avoid causing issues with the foundations, which they sunk 25 feet underground to keep the ride into the station smooth and the bridge structurally integral. The old track bed crosses Pinch Beck at a height of 120 feet and is formed of 17,000 cubic yards of masonry. The barrel vault is a very interesting bit of masonry dating all the way back to the Sumerians and Egyptians. I found this great website, designingbuildings.co.uk, which will be linked in the description, and according to them, a vault is a structural form composed of a series of arches, typically found in the construction of ceilings or roofs. The arrangement of the arches relative to one another determines the type of vault. So a barrel vault is sometimes referred to as a cradle vault, a tunnel vault or a wagon vault, is a continuous arch shape that may approximate a semi-cylinder in form, and is best exemplified in the roof of a tunnel. It is typically formed by a series of arches or vaults placed side by side or by a continuous shelf. Barrel vaults are first thought to have been developed by the Sumerians and were subsequently used by the Egyptians. Then they were used extensively in ancient Rome for stone structures such as cisterns and aqueducts, and also as part of major buildings like the Colosseum. Throughout the Middle Ages they were used across Europe as part of the construction of churches, and they continue to be a feature of modern architecture and engineering to this day. Barrow vaults must be able to withstand the outward pressure on the lower parts of the vault imposed by the structure above. If the barrow vault is underground, the pressure might be resisted by the fill surrounding it. If it is above ground, the outward pressure can be resisted by thick supporting walls, although this becomes less practical as the size of the vault increases. Additional strength can be provided in the form of supporting columns, stiffening diaphragm beams, side anchors or parallel walls that can distribute stress. The Thornton Viaduct was able to avoid issues with the supporting walls due to how far they sunk them underground. Still to this day it is remaining strong and steady, needing no additional work over the years to strengthen it up. It's little tidbits like that make me really love architecture. Moving on. The viaduct runs near the Great Northern Trail and was made redundant in 1963, later in 2008 becoming a part of the trail itself. It's Grade 2 listed now and has been given special rights to protection for the sake of preservation, like many historically significant sites across the UK. That is kinda like the overview, and in this next section we will take a closer look and even hear from a local newspaper, the Bradford Observer, who wrote a couple of stories about the viaduct when it was built in 1876. We will be able to get a better idea of how it was going to affect the locals, who actually built it and how the production went at the time. The Thornton branch of the Bradford, Halifax and Keighley Railway was commenced on the 11th of March 1874. The Bradford Observer on Monday the 13th of July reported that the cornerstone of the viaduct had been laid by Mr. Robinson Bentham, and addresses were made by several gentlemen, which we will hear more about in a moment. There was a procession throughout the streets of Thornton headed by a band playing music and other ceremonies to mark the moment. People were really into this viaduct, but more importantly it was the railway. In a time when transportation was really hard to come by, this gives the people close to wings by offering them a way to cover large distances quickly. Well, it gives the people tracks and carriages, not wings. Red Bull still hadn't been invented yet, and commercial flights were still a little bit away, but you know what I mean. Railways were the big invention of the day, and their mass adoption were great news for bridges and for the people. Benton and Woodwise subcontracted it to Messrs Sykes and Ashcroft under the supervision of John Rowlands. During its construction, only 2 men were reported to have died. The Bradford Observer on the 5th of September 1874 reported, headline, "Fatal Accident on the Bradford and Thornton Railway." It continues to say, an inquest was held at the Bull's Head Inn, Thornton, on Thursday on the body of a man named William Henry George Ashcroft, 26 years of age, a contractor on the viaduct on the Bradford and Thornton Railway, now being constructed at Thornton. In the 1st of September, while he was engaged in guiding a stone about 1.5 tons in weight that was being raised by a crane, the guide strap broke and the crane fell, striking the deceased's head with the jib end and killing him on the spot. A verdict of accidental death was returned. Great regret is expressed in Thornton at the sad accident, the deceased being a young man of industry and promise. Now, I've tried everything to get these papers from the archives, but they all want ridiculous amounts of money that I just don't have anywhere. Luckily, I'm getting all this from the website allaboutthornton.com, or .co.uk maybe, which I will leave a proper link for anyway in the description, because they have paid for the access to these papers, and they have published it for all of us to read for free. The next one is rather long, but I think you might like it because it does help paint a better picture of just how the local area thought about the new gigantic structure now running through the hills. The Bradford Observer on the 13th of July 1874 reports on the proceedings of the laying of the foundation stone by a workman, Mr. R. Bentham, and this is the best one. Headline, "The Bradford and Thornton Railway. catchy. Continues to say, the people of Thornton seem determined to mark their appreciation of the blessings of railway communication with the rest of the world. The above new line of railway, which is to affect this desideratum, it basically means to affect this like land, this area. I can't say that word. And which it is gratifying to state is making more satisfactory progress under the energetic management of Messrs. Benton and Woodwise, the contractors, seem destined to receive fresh recognition at each stage of its progress. Several sods have been cut, and on Saturday, the cornerstone of one of the piers forming the large viaduct across the Pinchbeck Valley at Thornton was laid, under the auspices of a committee of working men. This viaduct is a rather important undertaking, stretching as it does across the valley in an oblique direction behind the old mill. The opposite sides of this ravine it is intended to connect by a massive stone bridge of 20 arches, each 40 feet span, with brick interiors, the average depth being 75 feet and the greatest depth being 104 feet. The work has been entrusted by the chief contractors to Messrs. Sykes and Ashcroft have already made some progress with the huge job. Considerable preparation had been made on the part of the committee to render the stone laying a success, and in inviting the public to join in the procession to the ground assured them that it was to be conducted in a thoroughly respectable, orderly and creditable manner. The procession was formed opposite the Bull's Head Inn and consisted of the committee, about 30 in number, each wearing a white rosette, preceded by a youth, the son of Mr. Barker of the Wellington Inn, mounted on a massive draught horse and gorgeously attired in a blue velvet coat with silver bars and ermine trimmings, carrying the silver trowel. Next followed the Thornton brass band in uniform. After, or rather surrounding the committee, came a miscellaneous assemblage of individuals interested in the ceremony. The route of the procession was Market Street, New Road and Kipping Lane. Arrived at the site, around which and on the overhanging ground a large number of persons had taken up positions, the band playing Auld Lang Syne. I think I'm saying that right. Mr. J. Shackleton, postmaster, then mounted the stone to present Mr. R. Bentham, a working man, the silver trowel and a mallet, each with appropriate inscriptions. Both were very handsome implements, the mallet being especially creditable as a specimen of local workmanship. It was composed of boxwood, ebony and ivory and tulip wood, and had been made and presented by Mr. H. Ingham, wood turner of Market Street, Thornton. Mr. Shackleton, in addressing Mr. Bentham, said that on behalf of the working men of Thornton he had pleasure in presenting to him, as one of their own class, the handsome trowel and mallet. As was purely a working man's movement, he thought that Mr. Bentham, who had taken such an interest on the progress of the new line, had very appropriately been chosen to perform the ceremony of that day. Speaking of the facilities and travelling to and from Thornton, he said that they had to thank the milkmen for first instituting any means of conveyance whatsoever. As that trade had developed, they had increased facilities for getting backwards and forward, and laterally each inhabitant had even the chance of a carriage and pair to Bradford for 4p. He then referred to the circumstances under which the new line had been brought to the village and paid a compliment to Mr. Theo Peel for his exertions in the matter. Mr. Shackleton concluded by making the presentation amid loud cheers. Mr. Bentham then proceeded to lay the stone, the band playing Rule Britannia, and afterwards mounted upon it and addressed the assemblage. The speaker's homely phrase and evident earnestness seemed to amuse the audience greatly, and during his remarks he was loudly cheered, 3 cheers being given at the close. A volunteer glee party next sang in good style, Comrades in Arms, after a short address from Mr. T. Bates on behalf of Mr. Midgley Priestley, Mr. W. Williams, and music by the band. The proceedings terminated. A collection was also made for the Bradford hospitals. Now, all that was taken directly from a Bradford local newspaper in 1874. It is almost like a little time capsule that offers just a small glimpse into life in the 19th century. It's easy to forget how important and culturally and socially influential simple newspapers were, but they were highly instrumental in the flow of information. I'm really glad we saved them either way. Overall, the viaduct and overall project of the railroad was a success, and although the railroad is no longer active for passengers, its memory will be forever immortalised by the viaduct and remain a significant part of the area forever, I think. But that's going to be the video. I could chat to you forever, but that's what the live streams are for, am I right? Come and join us. We actually went to visit this location for fun, and we have done a few times. It's a magnificent bridge and a real sight to behold, like many bridges. This is just one of hundreds of thousands in the world, and I would love to visit and talk about a different bridge next time. Let me know in the comment if we should do more of these. Anywho, thank you very much for listening all the way through. YouTube gives me a nice little treat when someone does that. Hope you have a fantastic rest of the day. Stay awesome. Peace!